Hello, hello, hello. My name is Close Shave Dave, and welcome back to Resident Evil 5, where we're going to continue and we're going to find out more about Sheva Alomar. Listed within this file is general background information overview of BSAA agent Sheva Alomar, as pieced together from various sources. This information listed here is neither complete, nor should it be used as psychological analysis of the subject. Sheva Alomar was born into an impoverished family situation in a small factory town situated in Africa, this particular town being home to Umbrella Plant 57. As with most factory towns, the plant was the lifeblood of the town, bringing in much needed revenue and steady employment for its populace. Almost 80% of the town's adult population was employed at the factory in some facility, including Sheva's parents. While the pay was low by most nation standard, it provided a steady income for the townspeople and a happy childhood for Sheva. This happiness was short-lived, however. While only 8 years old, Sheva's peaceful life was brought to an abrupt end by the sound of sirens erupting from the factory. As the sirens pierced into the air, an ominous plume of black smoke poured out of the factory. Even as a child, Sheva knew something was terribly wrong. With dread in her heart, she ran toward the factory. Arriving at the factory, she soon discovered the entrance blocked. In place of the kind old man who used to stand guard at the entrance, strange adults in protective suits were everywhere, their faces hidden by masks. Sheva could not understand what was happening. I realized years later that they were wearing anti-biohazard protective gear. They were part of Umbrella's special forces. She may have not understood the muffled voices emanating from beneath those masks at the time, but the assault rifles they leveled at her more than made their intentions understood. The country was not a very stable place to begin with, and near her town resided members of a large anti-government guerrilla army. Although only a child, Sheva knew all too well the violence that often accompanied those with guns. The adults in the village that remained were promptly executed by these gunmen. Jesus. Sheva was spared this same fate thanks to the vigilance of a neighbour who was able to get her back to her parents' home unnoticed. Thus began the longest night of Sheva's life. Crippled by fear, she could only wait and pray for her parents' return. The night passed and a new day dawned, but still they did not return. As night on another day fell, she sensed a presence outside her home. Unable to contain her relief and joy, she ran to the door to greet her parents. As she swung the door open, crying aloud with joy, she was soon met with disappointment and confusion. For at the door were not her parents rushing to embrace her, but her uncle, with a look of shock and horror painted upon his face. His words crushed any hope she had left. "Your parents are dead. There was an accident at the factory." Taking anything of value left in the house, her uncle then took Sheva to live with his family, taking her away from the only home she had ever known. Her life with her uncle would be brief. Not only was her uncle's family extremely poor, but he also had 7 children of his own to care for. Even though Sheva was a blood relative, he probably would have never come for her if he hadn't thought he would receive financial compensation from the factory. That compensation never came. Umbrella never gave out any payments, and soon her aunt and uncle were unable to feed her. Life was hell for Sheva. Not only was she on the verge of starvation, she yearned to be with her parents again. In her grief, she became fixated on the notion that they were still alive. Oh, Sheva. As the days passed, this belief grew so strong to the point where she could think of nothing else. She knew she had to find them. So one night, as the moon bathed the savannah in silver, Sheva ran away from her uncle's house and headed back to her hometown and the life that was stolen from her. The thought of her parents drove her on, but the expansive savannah is a harsh environment for one so young and small. During her second night, she began to feel the effects of malnutrition. Unable to find food, Sheva soon collapsed. A night in the savannah is not a quiet affair. The sounds of animals plodding along, beasts howling at the moon, insects chirping and buzzing about, and the dry wind soughing through the grass. Sheva considered them all with wonder. She had grown up in a town and was unaccustomed to her new surroundings. Though the cacophony of strange noises, Sheva picked up a sound that was quite familiar to her. She heard the low rumblings of an engine and the sound of tires cracking over the dirt. A truck pulled up next to Sheva, and a stranger got out of the passenger side and spoke to her. If she replied to him or not, she couldn't recall, but the man picked her up and placed her in the bed of the truck. The man that found Sheva was an anti-government guerrilla fighter. He provided her with food, shelter, and a place to call home. Unfortunately for Sheva, this good turn was accompanied by some bad news. She was told that the incident at the Umbrella factory was not an accident, and the factory manufactured bioweapons, and Umbrella was carrying out the final test on one of its newer weapons at the dilapidated factory. The regular employees who worked there were unaware of what Umbrella was actually creating, and they were paid for it, and they paid for it with their lives, including Sheva's mother and father. After concluding the test, Umbrella took measures to conceal the entire affair. With the assistance of the government's army, they destroyed the factory along with the entire town, effectively wiping the town Sheva had called home off the map. At this news, Sheva was filled with rage. She hated Umbrella and blamed them for her parents' deaths. And she hated the government for just rolling over at Umbrella's behest. It was at this moment she decided to join the guerrillas in their fight against the government. Sheva started out by doing laundry, cooking meals, and taking care of other chores. After only a few years with the guerrillas, she was given her first gun. She doesn't like to talk about her time with the guerrillas. Perhaps the memories are too painful, or maybe she's too ashamed of what she did there. One of her main duties with the guerrillas was to go into town and purchase supplies for the group. For 7 long years, Sheva stayed with the guerrillas. By this time, she was a teenager and had spent most of her known life with the guerrillas. Perhaps due to her age, when she went into town, the townspeople never suspected her of being a guerrilla fighter. It could be for this very reason that she was the only one sent. It was on one of these occasions while she was in town that a man approached her. He looked like a local but spoke with a strange foreign accent. Handing her a piece of paper and speaking in a hurried voice, he stated, "Read this. If you believe what it says, come to the church in the back alley in 2 hours." After speaking these words, he disappeared into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Sheva turned the paper over in her hand, and her eyes were drawn to one word: Umbrella. It was the same pharmaceutical company whose selfish aims took her parents from her. If that incident had never happened, perhaps her life would have been different. The message on the paper said that the guerrillas were planning on using bioweapons to conduct a large-scale terrorist attack that would overthrow the government. Umbrella was going to make a deal with the guerrillas to provide them with the bioweapons. The man wanted Sheva's help in stopping the deal from going through. At first, Sheva thought it was a government trap, but deep down, she knew the note spoke the truth. When asked how she knew, she had this to say: "My country was strongly influenced by France, and many government officials spoke in a French patois. But this man was different. I couldn't place his accent at the time, but somehow I knew I could trust him." Sheva followed her instincts. She went to the church and met 2 men there. One of them had given her the note earlier. The other wore a suit with no tie and said that he was from the US government. What the man in the suit wanted seemed straightforward enough. The apprehension of the representative from Umbrella From what he said, this particular person held the key to causing an irreparable blow to Umbrella, but in order to arrest him, they needed Sheva's help. As long as they got their man, they wouldn't do anything to her or her fellow guerrillas. Even if they did not succeed in arresting the man in question, they promised not to turn her or her company or her companions over to the authorities. The man in the suit's offer seemed credible, but could she betray those who had been like a family to her? The man seemed to understand Sheva's apprehension, so he asked her one simple question. Don't you want to see Umbrella punished for what they've done? Sheva quickly nodded her head. That's why we selected you, but if you want to help us fight Umbrella, then you're going to have to leave your so-called friends. And then what? What's in it for me? Look around. You know these guerrillas you are with aren't doing this for some greater good. They'll do anything to topple the government, including things you know are wrong. Help us, you can finally do some good for the people of your country. And what makes you think a 15-year-old girl can help? Someday you'll learn that age matters very little. A person's life is not defined by age, but by the choices they make. You have the chance to fight for something here that goes beyond just you. Something that affects the entire world. Can you really walk away when so much is at stake? Sheva would never forget these words. 3 days later, the Special Forces team arrived at the location where the deal was taking place. Sheva had left the door to the building unlocked, and she wore a wire so the team on standby could hear what was taking place. The operation was a success. The target from Umbrella was quickly apprehended and taken away. Sheva and the guerrillas were taken to the American consulate, there to be released 2 days later with no charges pressed, just as promised. Recognizing Sheva's abilities, or perhaps moved by pity, the man in the suit offered Sheva the chance to start life anew in America. With nothing left in Africa for her, Sheva decided to take him up on his offer. Shortly after arriving in America, Sheva's high intelligence and drive quickly became apparent. She surpassed any and all expectations, even learning English to a native level in a mere 6 months. Within 2 years of arriving in the US, she had enrolled at a university. After graduating with high honours from her university, her legal guardian, the man in the suit, suggested that she join the newly formed BSAA to help others as she had been helped. Umbrella had already been dismantled many years prior, but Sheva had not let go of her hatred towards them and all others like them. After completing basic training, she was assigned to the unit led by Josh Stone. There she trained with his unit for 8 months, learning everything she would need to know to survive in the field. After the completion of her training, she was handpicked to become a BSAA agent. She is currently involved in operations throughout the world. Ricardo Irving. According to official records, Ricardo Irving is overseer to the oil refinery owned by Tricell Africa Division's Resource Development Department. Crude and arrogant, he possesses an insatiable desire for the accumulation of wealth. It is with these traits, along with his unique resourcefulness, that have most likely made him Tricell's ideal agent in dealings with selling BOWs to black market individuals. The money gained from these dealings is then invested by Tricell Africa back into their bioweapons research and development. Sorry, I don't know why I was reading that so slow. The demonstration of those weapons for clients act as operational tests. Given the degree of Irving's involvement, it is believed that he is one of only a handful of people that know the full extent of Tricell's bioweapon business. Irving's activities and their connection to Tricell, however, have been carefully kept under wraps. Adding to the misdirection is the fact that he is officially employed within the Research Development Division and not the Pharmaceutical Division that sponsors the BSAA. Okay. Okay. Tricell is a conglomerate comprised of shipping, of shipping, natural resources development, and pharmaceuticals. Each division runs on its own capital and as such could all be considered separate entities under one parent company. Also of note are the divisions that exist between each of Tricell's branch offices. When the BSAA learned of Irving's latest deal, they viewed it as illicit activity conducted on his own and without support from Tricell. Little did they know. BSAA's mission, therefore, was not to fight biological weapons, and to apprehend a smuggler involved in an illicit deal. Irving was able to exploit that misconception to the fullest. Irving was informed of the BSAA's mission, and changed the location of the deal to a mine outside of the Kijuju Autonomous Zone, KAZ. When a BSAA team arrived at what they thought was the deal's location inside the KAZ, they walked into a trap. Before the team even arrived, the improved version of Las Plagas was released upon the population of the town, transforming most of them into Majini. This intel was acquired by Alpha Team and later confirmed by the data recovered by the backup team, Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar. Prior to Irving's deal, it appears that a sample of the Ouroboros virus was also released upon Alpha Team's arrival and was responsible for the termination of Dan Jachant's team. Irving did not take into account that the Ouroboros would be engaged and defeated by Agents Redfield and Alomar, nor that a hard disk and its data would be seized. The data obtained from the hard disk allowed the two agents to proceed to the actual location of Irving's transaction, the mine. When confronted with the reality that his plan had failed, Irving was forced to take the following actions. First, he contacted his partners in the transaction and requested to delay the deal, after which point he went to the mine to retrieve any documents and materials relevant to the transaction. It was at this point that Redfield and Alomar found him. However, it was obvious that he had a backup plan for just such a contingency. Irving escaped thanks to the help of a hooded figure he had on standby. The two agents were left to deal with Popo Karamu, a bat-based bioweapon that was originally intended to be used in the transaction. He was actually planning on selling that. It is thought that Irving released the BOW on the agents in retaliation for disrupting the transaction and not to aid in his escape. Wow. It was becoming apparent by this point that Irving's mental stability was in question. Whether his irrational behavior was brought on by the interference of the agents, or if the increased stress only brought out his true tendencies, is unknown. Irving's situation, however, would digress even further. After escaping from the mine, he was soon discovered by Captain Josh Stone's Delta team inside the KAZ. In order to escape, Irving unleashed the Nadesu, confirmed to be based on the El Gigante BOW used in Europe. The frustration of losing two large valuable BOWs in such short succession must have been keenly felt by the avaricious Irving. After researching the conclusion that there was nothing more he could do, Irving plotted to escape with his accumulated wealth, but he was soon overtaken by the hooded figure, who provided him a vial containing Las Plagas. This was to be as punishment for failure. He was to administer this on himself in order to fight the two agents. This vial contained a Las Plagas variant known as a control plaga. According to BSAA intel, the use of the control plaga has been documented by Leon S. Kennedy in Europe. The control plaga differs from the common form in that it does not take over a host's rational thought process. Another difference being that it causes extreme transformations to the host. As such, control plaga hosts must resign themselves to never being able to live as a normal human again, which they seem okay with, and I don't get why. In a last-ditch effort, Irving detonated the oil refinery, but unfortunately for him, the refinery was virtually dry at the time, thus limiting the size of the explosion. His hope was that he could destroy all incriminating evidence and kill agents Redfield and Alomar, so he would not have to resort to using the control plaga. Irving was left with no choice but to administer the injection to himself, at which point he underwent an immense and rapid transformation. But even the power he gained from that transformation did not avail him, and he met his end at the hands of the two agents. Now I'm going to read this, but I do need to take a drink because I have been talking all fucking day. All day. Sorry about that. The Nidipaya residue in unique wooden structures reside. They reside in unique wooden structures in the wetlands. Their advanced architectural techniques are used throughout the world to repair and maintain many damaged ancient ruins. This is how the world at large knows of the Nidipaya. But the Nidipaya possess a secret that they do not wish to share with the rest of the world, that the ancient ruins of the Nidipaya kingdom reside beneath their land. In ancient times, the surrounding lands were all under the control of the sovereign Nidipaya kingdom, and the city of ruins was the seat of that monarch. Special attention should be given to the way the sovereign were chosen. While the Nidipaya did have a monarchy, the king was not decided by birthright, but by the abilities and qualities he displayed during a certain required ceremony. This ceremony employed a special plant that grew in the sun garden, residing in the deepest area of the royal city. Oh, okay, they took that. Okay. They took that to decide who was going to be king. This plant was known as the Stairway to the Sun, which is probably where Spencer got the idea he could be a god. The Stairway to the Sun was an extremely poisonous plant. Pardon me. And its effects were fatal if consumed, though some individuals possessed a natural resistance to the poison. The Nidipaya believed that a man who could prevail against the poison was destined to become king. Vestiges of this ceremony are still carried out once a year by the Nidipaya for the continual peace of their ancestors' spirits. Okay. Even with a natural resistance, finding an individual that could survive ingestion of the powerful poison was a rarity. It is said by the Nidipaya people that one such man reigned as king for hundreds of years. Whether this legend has any validity to it cannot be ascertained at present. So that will be why Spencer thought it could make him immortal. What is known is that this once flourishing kingdom fell into decline and was eventually abandoned by the Nidipaya people. It is not known what made the Nidipaya abandon their city for the wetlands. Any information regarding these matters comes from oral traditions and hearsay, which obviously calls into question the validity of the information. What is known, though, is that after leaving the city, the Nidipaya viewed it as a sacred ground and vowed to keep its existence hidden from outsiders. All Nidipaya males between the ages of 13 and 25 are required to spend 2 years in the city to guard and protect it. It is through their continued vigilance that this great city's existence has been kept and undiscovered by the outside world. There was, however, one instance of outsiders discovering their secret city in the 1960s. A corporation went into the sacred city to find the plant used in their ceremonies and take it by force. The Nidipaya fiercely resisted this incursion into their land. In times of peace, the Nidipaya are builders of great renown, but when the need for war arises, they can become stout warriors. This adaptability is the essence of the Nidipaya. Their physical prowess in battle was their greatest weapon, and they used it to fight bravely, but they were overwhelmed by the enemy's technological advances. During this time, many of the Nidipaya youths consumed the plant in an effort to fight off the invaders. Ah, that's so sad. A lot of them will have just died. That's what happens when you get people desperate. Then, in the end, the Nidipaya were forced to cede the area of the Sun Garden and beyond to the corporation's control. But the Nidipaya have not yet given up hope of one day reclaiming their sacred land and returning it to its former glory. U8. U8 was the giant spider that attacked me on the lift, I believe. U8 is the name of the BOW born from a weapons development project involving Las Plagas. Really? I'm surprised at that. The creatures come... I would have thought it would be just T-Virus or Progenitor. I'm surprised that it's Las Plagas. The creature is comprised of the refined DNA of multiple organisms, specifically the DNA of shelled organisms. The altercations of this aspect of the creature is reflected in its dark colouring. The carapace has an unparalleled durability and was shown to be resistant to direct hit from RPGs and tests. Ooh. This gigantic creature has another special feature in its design. U8 is some tens of meters tall, and its pincer legs are over 3 meters in length, which it uses as a weapon in close combat. These pincer attacks are not especially quick, but they are powerful enough to pierce the armor of a tank. Flying BOWs reside in the part of U8's abdomen, originally intended for the maturation of eggs in an unaltered specimen. Learn to read, David, come on. These flying BOWs are not larval U8s, but completely different creatures entirely. In a close quarters, one-on-one fight, U8 is an overwhelming powerful adversary. But when it has to combat more than one opponent, its large size becomes somewhat of a liability. Okay. Its considerable bulk also makes it vulnerable to long-range attacks. To compensate for this weakness, it uses the flying BOWs in much the same way an aircraft carrier uses jet fighters. Okay. Some would consider U8 an impeccable fighting machine, but it does have its flaws. U8 size can be detriment because it requires massive amounts of sustenance to maintain functionality. As such, U8 is not suitable for long-term assignments. According to Tricell's business information, U8 is most effective as security for facility or when used in attacks of limited time. Before it can be used in an offensive attack, consideration must be given to the means of transporting U8 to the destination. Also, U8 is designed to reach a large size very rapidly, and this breeds imperfections in its carapace. These imperfections are limited to a certain area of the carapace, but a direct attack on this area will severely damage U8. Even with these flaws, U8's functionality, combat, effectiveness, and relative ease to control have made it popular in the bioweapons market. Probably also it's a big spider. Records indicate that Ricardo Irving has sold a multitude of both the original U8 and the upgraded version U8 Prime, which has a multi-layered carapace for extra defense along with shell covering formerly exposed areas. Irving, you bastard! Oh, fuck. Okay. There were plans at one point to design a lighter, faster U8 that could maintain functionality for longer periods of time, but this would result in a significant downgrade in its defensive capabilities. This plan appears to have been scrapped. Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar reported imperfections in the carapace of the U8 they faced, so it is suspected that it was one of the original models. Wow, okay. Note that the U in U8 does not stand for Ouroboros, but for Ultimate. See, that's what I was a little confused at. I thought it was, but it had no tar. Okay, good to know. Alright, thank you very much for watching. That's R4 for this episode, and I will see you next episode. Goodbye.